Welcome to our tutorial. Today, we are going to learn how to paint a transparent flower using two popular watercolor techniques, glazing and wet on dry. Before we get started, here's what you'll need. A watercolor paper, watercolor paints, a round brush, a cup of water and paper towels to dab excess water. Before we start, let's talk about the wet on dry technique. This method involves painting with wet watercolor directly onto dry paper. For our first layer, we will use this technique to paint the base of our flower petals. Mix a light pink wash and load your brush with it. Paint each petal with this light pink color, one at a time. The paint will sit on the dry paper and create crisp edges for each petal, which is exactly what we want in this first stage. Here I'm just removing excess paint by gently scrubbing the paint with a wet clean brush. Once you've painted the base layer of all the petals, let this layer dry completely. This is important because we don't want the colors to bleed when we apply our next layers. Now let's move on to glazing. Glazing is a technique where we apply thin and transparent layers of color over dry paint. Each layer darkens or changes the underlying color while letting the earlier layers show through. This creates depth and a more luminous, transparent effect. Mix a slightly darker pink for your second layer and paint over each petal again. We will just basically repeat the same process, adding more glazes with a progressively darker pink. This layering creates a smooth gradient that makes the petals look soft and three-dimensional. Just make sure to let each glaze dry before adding a new one. For the center of the flower, we're going to use a wet on wet technique. First, dampen the area at the center of the flower with clean water using a clean brush. Then, take a darker pink or magenta and gently drop the wet paint into the damp area. The paint will spread naturally on the damp surface, creating a soft, diffused effect. You can also add a few more drops of the darker color to increase the intensity. Let's just paint leaves to finish the whole look of our painting. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned something new about watercolor painting.